2023 has probably been one of the most stacked years in gaming in recent memory, from things from Baldur's Gate 3 to
So
Alan Wake
good.
2 to
So
Resident
good.
Evil 4 and System
So
Shock
good, bro.
remakes. Every game this year has been fantastic, even though a lot of them have come out with issues. Those issues get resolved,
Hey, please.
and then they
Dude, if we could
turn
get like
out to
more people
be
to join
great.
us.
It is incredible how gaming has
No,
just
I
propelled
wish there
forward
was like
this
a
year,
circuit,
even
where
with
we could
this year
circle
having
around
so
the
many
well.
layoffs and studios shutting down in the industry. It's still been a great year for gaming. And
Oh,
guys,
is
the
it?
indie scene
Yeah,
is
progressed
no
definitely since
different.
then.
It has been awesome. There have been so many games
Oh,
that
yeah.
have come out this year. It's impossible to play all of them. There is just not enough time in the world, let alone in one year, to hit every single one. But also with that, the ones I did play were fantastic this year. So that means there's gotta be a winner though, the game of the year, and that's what we're here to discuss. So hey everyone, it's Finn with Our Eyes on Indie, and I am super happy to be here to give you our top 10 indie games of 2023. Without further ado, let's get into it with number 10. Number 10 being Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. I am a massive Warhammer 40k fan, and this year was shaping up to be a pretty good year. We got some awesome Darktide updates. We were going to get Space Marine 2, which unfortunately got pushed back to next year, and we got Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. So, with that said, there are a lot of 40k games out there, but Bolt Gun is going to hold a special place for me. It's fantastic. It's that boomer shooter style that we've seen coming back in recent years, starting with Doom back in 2016 and just propelling forward as we go on. And the indie scene's had some great ones, from Forgive Me Father to now Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun or even Ultra Kill. These boomer shooter style games are just wonderful, and Bolt Gun I think is my favorite because it's got the old school style of sprites that aren't really 3D, but they turn at you so it kind of looks 3D, and where enemies just have these animations that look old but obviously wouldn't actually happen during the time period of boomer shooters. The animations are all incredible. The reload animations in particular are great. Being able to taunt the enemies of the Imperium of Man is awesome. Who doesn't want to do that? And you get to play as an Ultramarine. Who doesn't like Ultramarines, okay? You forces of chaos, you're heretics, alright? You lose anyway. But it's just so much fun. It's so satisfying to go through purging heretics and Xenos and daemons, and just going through is an absolute blast. Is it the longest game in the world? No, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a lot of fun. It has just enough to keep you engaged throughout the whole time, and enough to where from time to time, I'll be honest, I like to kind of boot it up, play through a level again, and just have some fun with it. So that's number 10. Coming in at number 9 is Raven's Watch. This is a game that I unfortunately did not get around to actually writing and recording my review on, but it is one I will be getting a review out at some point as it continues its early access journey. It's from the creators of Curse of the Dead Gods, which is a fantastic roguelike where you're in an Aztec temple, and this one goes in a totally different direction, where you are playing as different characters from literature, working with Sandman and the Ravens to stave off the nightmares invading Reverie. It is a whole lot of fun. They now have 2 of the 3 planned areas in the game ready to go, both of which are unique with different enemies, different quests, different things you can find, which is super awesome. The characters themselves that you play as range from Beowulf to Geppetto. You got Sun Wukong, who just got released, and they are all so much fun to play. It's a roguelike where people criticized it for being very repetitive when it first came out, due to the fact that it was one map, each run took about 20 minutes, and that was all you could do. But the thing for me with it was it still felt nice and fresh, because even if I was like, okay, I've already seen all this stuff, but I haven't done it with this character, and this character plays totally different from this character. Like Aladdin, who's incredibly fast and relies on the genie to get him out of a jam. Or you play as Red Riding Hood, and her whole thing is she's quick and nimble during the day, but at nighttime she becomes this tank werewolf that has lifesteal. Or you've got Mussolini, who her whole thing is she's got a wisp that you control and move around. It's so much fun. Each of them so incredibly unique, and with talents that you get as you level up that actually change how your abilities work. Instead of just being like, here's a stat buff. It's like, no, actually now this ability will do this thing as well. or this will now synergize with this better, or this or that. And it's so much fun. I can't wait to see how it continues to go forward as we approach 1.0 in the next coming year. Coming in at number 8 is The Last Spell. This is a game now, I've been playing since it got released in early access, and this year it finally got brought into the 1.0 limelight, and I could not be happier with the full 1.0 release. I have played so much of this game. All right, it's a turn based tactical defense roguelike with colony management where you're building up your town during the day phase, and then night comes and the crawlers come out of the mist, and you have to defend your town and defend the final mages who are casting the last spell to get rid of all magic in the world to end the apocalypse that has been brought about. It's a cool concept. It's a nice and interesting story, especially the way they weave in the roguelike elements of you coming back should you fail into the story and how that progresses the story forward. It's really good. And the variety of the different towns that you can defend, the different heroes that you have with their little quirks, the perks that they can get rolled, the stats they can get rolled, the different weapons, and how each of them has their own set of abilities. So you have to take that into consideration with, okay, I know this person has this stats, so maybe I should get them this weapon, or maybe they're not going to be good with this weapon. Maybe my mage should also carry a great sword, and it's just a lot of fun. It's so good and so incredibly replayable, even after all my hours in early access and resetting my progress during the 1.0. I have never gotten bored whenever I booted up The Last Spell. It's always one I can come back to. I can do a night and then maybe come back another day and do the next night. It's just so well done. It's tight, it's tough, and it's a great time. Next up at number 7 is Inkbound. Oh boy, do I love Inkbound, and I think that should show you just how great all of the games on this list are, that Inkbound's my number 7, because I have sung the praises of this game nonstop since it came out. It has most of my playtime on Steam this year underneath Destiny 2, so that shows you how much I've played this game. And it is just so much fun. A tactical RPG that's a roguelike, that's also very multiplayer focused, so you can play with your friends, with unique classes from a weaver, where you're setting up a web of weaves on the field, with a star captain who's all about buffing and dealing lots of damage, or if you just want to go full ninja, you can play as the Moss Cloak. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great options, very unique things. The vestige system, which is all the items that you use to build your character throughout a run, and the augmentations to your abilities to give them extra little things here and there. And oh man, the vestiges recently being reworked in the most recent update with the 2 new classes. It adds another layer of strategic thinking for your builds. Not only did they change how a bunch of vestiges work, but they completely reworked the system. So now there's this whole kind of auto battler set system, and you want different sets of things to give you different bonuses. And obviously, some bonuses are going to be better for certain builds and certain classes than others. And it adds so much to it. And also, huge shout out to Shiny Shoe for just completely getting rid of all monetization in game. That's not really something we see at all in the gaming world, and it's a big dangerous move, especially for a multiplayer focused game, to just totally get rid of that. And I've got to say, I mentioned this when I initially did my review of Inkbound. This statement still stands. I think that it's some of the best monetization I've seen in a game ever, because not only were they giving you half of what you needed to get the season passes just for having the game in early access, but then also you could get the pass for free if you just went and played enough of the game, because you already had half of what you needed. And that was really cool. Like, that was awesome. And the skins were super cheap and they were really good. So there was never anything where I was like, why would anyone pay money for that? I was like, I would pay that much for that. I would support the devs for this. It's not like it's a full price game anyway. So I just wanted to give a huge shout out to that, because I think they deserve it. Next up is Shadow Gambit: The Cursed Crew. And I gotta say, off the bat, it is a sad thing that Mimi Studios is closing down due to the fact that it's just a lot of work. The genre of game they make, the real-time tactics stealth strategy genre, something that they revived and are now leaving with a bang with Shadow Gambit Cursed Crew. It is my favorite of their games. I've played Shadow Tactics, I've played Desperados 3. Both of those games are fantastic, and Shadow Gambit Cursed Crew is by far my favorite of them. From just the pirate aesthetic with the cursed crew, that's so much fun. The characters all having their different abilities that are so great. Toya is still my favorite. I like teleporting. I like putting marks on things. It's super cool. And just the way you go through, choose which characters you have next, and how you plan around it. Do I need characters that can swim? Do I need characters that can climb? How do I want to do these things? It's so great. The moment to moment decision making, and then being able to pause, go back in time, and retry things. Maybe just experiment around is something I enjoy doing. And now playing through again, that I've completed the game. Unfortunately, wasn't able to complete enough time to review it, but then completed the game, and now coming back through with the DLCs that just got released. This game is just so good, and I'm so sad to see Mimi go, but it's number 6 here on the list. Now, I might get some flack for this one, but number 5 is Sea of Stars, and yes, I know, it won Indie Game of the Year at the Game Awards, and don't get me wrong, Sea of Stars is a phenomenal game, but for me, it just wasn't my number 1 this year. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that just shows the quality of games that have come out this year, once again. But Sea of Stars is fantastic. It's a throwback to old school RPGs, especially on the Super Nintendo, things like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI. These games are awesome. Alright, I'm a huge fan of RPGs, JRPGs. CRPGs are my favorite genre, but JRPGs are my close second. It's just one of those things where, oh man, it's just so good. Okay, it's just so well done. From the awesome pixel art style to the combat system where you have to worry about stopping your enemy's abilities, but then also you've got a timing system to keep it engaging. The way that you get to choose your hero turn order, but can't use them all until a round is passed. It's great. And the story, which I thought was going to be very generic at first and seemed that way, got really, really good. And I enjoyed it immensely. These side characters are wonderful, alright? And Garl is such a fantastic character. And just to throw it out there so I think people understand why, I think the reason this didn't go all the way for me was I was not a huge fan of Zale and Valir as main characters. I am one person where my main characters, I like my main characters. I like them to have personality. It's why I like characters like Lloyd Bannings from the Trails series, if you've played those. They're just, I like it when they have character, and Zale and Valir didn't have that for me. That's kind of one of my big complaints about Sea of Stars, but I'm only saying this so people don't get mad at me and go, you have no reason to put this game at number 5. How dare you? Because yes, I do think this game is awesome, and I love it. Coming in at number 4 is Witchfire. This is a game I have waited years to play ever since it got announced, and I'm not disappointed in the slightest. It's a mix between Destiny, Dark Souls, and an extraction shooter. If that sounds cool to you, then here you go, now you know. And it's really great. It's got the shooting feel of Destiny with the leveling up of Dark Souls with collecting Witchfire, but then also an extraction shooter because you get in and then you have to decide, do I just want to extract with the Witchfire I've gotten, or do I want to keep going and maybe go and try and fight the boss of the area? It's in early access still, so there are actually only 2 areas in the game right now, but each of those areas is incredibly unique from each other, with some different layouts, a few different traps and things you have to worry about. The bosses are really tough. The game itself is just hard in general. There are so many times I find myself just dying at the slightest misstep, and I love that. I like a good challenge. And the thing too is, like, the whole world is interesting. You're this prayer and immortal, like, magic infused person that goes and hunts witches for the Vatican. How can that not be cool? The upgrade system's also super interesting, with you researching as you spend time out in the zones and just going through, and I cannot wait to see how this game continues to grow as it goes throughout its early access period, what the other areas are like, what the final areas can be like, what other guns and spells are going to be showing up as we continue this journey. It's just got me excited, and I'm probably going to play more Witchfire today. In fact, that's how much I enjoyed this game. All right, coming in at number 3, I'm cheating on this one. It's all 3 Riot Forge games that came out this year. And yes, this kind of goes into the debate that was also with the Game Awards with Dave the Diver of like what counts as an indie game, since yes, these games were backed by Riot, and we all know that Riot is a small indie dev company, right? But these were all still developed and done by indie studios, and so for me, I'm counting it. And I was having a hard time. I was talking with some friends while I was working on this list. I was like, I really liked all 3 of the Riot Forge games this year, and I know there's a little bit of bias because I'm a huge League fan, but I want to put them on the list because I do think they're just genuinely good games in their own rights. And they're like, well, I mean, you can. So I kind of compromised with myself and put all 3 in this one spot because it was hard making this list. It was, but they're all 3 just great in their own right. Whether it was Mage Seeker, following one of my favorite characters to play in League, Silas, in the Mage Revolution against Demacia, was really cool to have that through. And the story was fun. The combat was good. It was engaging. I liked the systems of taking magic and how that was implemented. The boss fights were super good in Mage Seeker, very cinematic with the pixel art style from, again, the people at Brass Moonlighter and are now bringing us Cataclysmo, which I'm excited to see how that goes. Then we had Convergence, which is all about Echo, another character I really enjoyed playing in League, and that was an awesome 2D Metroidvania brawler style game with combat that felt super good, and with the time travel being implemented so well, of just using that to reduce the damage because you're like, oh, I took that hit, let me go back, let me fix that. And man, playing on the hardest difficulty, when I went back to get the footage for this, I forgot how difficult it was. I just kind of loaded up a random save partway through the game and was like, oh man, I kind of forgot how hard this game can be, especially because I'm not very good at 2D games. With the story being very well done, with the time travel, dealing with all that, and just the way they implement time travel in the game as a whole, so much fun, so well done. And finally, Song of Nunu, which I actually did get to review, uh, is one that, as I said in my review, just had a smile on my face the entire time I was playing. I don't even play Nunu and Willump in League of Legends. I think I've maybe played 1 game on them, or 2 at the most, and that's it. But it was just fun. I was just smiling, whether it be hanging out with Braum or Ornn, or just looking at the incredible vistas of the Freljord. It was just a great time. And while combat's simple in Song of Nunu, I love the finishing animations. They're just so well done. And it didn't need to be a crazy thing. It was more about the adventure and the story than anything else. And so, I just had to put all 3 on the list because they're all great in their own right, and I think that Riot Forge has a great future ahead. Coming up at number 2, the runner-up, and this was a hard toss-up between these 2 for a while. This one is Killer Frequency. Oh man, Killer Frequency. I may have a little bit of bias on this because I studied radio broadcasting in college, but man, this game is just so good. All right, you play as a phone-in talk show host for the radio station in a small town, and there's a serial killer on the loose. Now, due to circumstances, all 911 calls are being routed to your radio station, which means it's up to you to help the people of the town with those emergencies. It's so good, all right? From the writing to the acting, my gosh, the acting in this game is just so good. It's awesome. And now this goes into the kind of walking simulator category that things like Firewatch or Call of the Sea fall into, where you're kind of doing these puzzles and listening to the narrative as you go down. There's not a whole lot of like gameplay in terms of you're not going to be fighting, you're going to be instead working on your radio panel. That's kind of the whole game. You're going to be running the radio show and using clues and stuff to figure out how you can help these people from over their wavelengths. It's just a great time, and surprisingly, very surprisingly, there are actually some moments that had me pretty scared, especially later on in the game, with just how things are done, the way it sets up the atmosphere as you go through, despite the fact that you're just in a radio station, is pretty awesome. And this is one that's definitely worth your time. I beat the game in just about, it was like 6-ish hours, I believe, and it's one where at some point I'm going to play back through. It's just so good, and I cannot recommend Killer Frequency enough. All right, finally, number one, here it is. This is my game of the year, and I think it's a little divisive because not everyone liked the changes here, but it's Darkest Dungeon 2. All right, Darkest Dungeon 2 is my indie game of the year. There is no doubt, no question about it. I love Darkest Dungeon. Darkest Dungeon is one of my all-time favorite games. It was my favorite game for the longest time until it got dethroned. But man, I love Darkest Dungeon, from the incredible narration and the story building throughout it to the characters that you're going to have die as you go on your journey, each of them being unique with their own quirks and the dialogue. I like the new relationship system of characters bantering back and forth and having things where they become friends, maybe they become enemies. And as they've changed it so that doesn't happen as often, which is pretty enjoyable because it could be a pain when they became enemies so quickly before. Man, it's just great. The new changes to how characters work with new passive things and stats is awesome. I like the path system. I like being able to delve into the backstory of each of the characters. And I know people complained about no Hamlet, right? And the whole delve thing, that's not how it's done anymore, but I don't mind it at all. I'm okay with the roguelike structure of Darkest Dungeon 2. I don't see anything bad with it. It's them still having the same core of Darkest Dungeon with that combat and storytelling and the narration, but just changing it enough to where it's different. And I think that's what sequels need to be, right? Sequels need to be different. They shouldn't just be a rehashing. And that's what Darkest Dungeon 2 does. And I think it does it incredibly well. There's just so much I love about this game. And to be honest with you, I think the only thing that I could level against it is screw that stupid librarian. I can't tell you how many times my party has died to that librarian. I freaking hate that boss fight so much. I don't know why. I just struggle with it every time I come to it. But with that said, Darkest Dungeon 2 is just incredible. It just got its first DLC, which brought in an entirely new class and brought back the Crusader. And oh man, it's just so good. I cannot overstate it enough. And so that's it. That's the top 10 indie games of 2023. And I just want to say that this is all my personal opinion. It's not me saying these are like, oh my gosh, like this is the definitive way to make a game or anything. Well, I definitely think that, and I'm not just going to tell you this is textbook or anything like that. This is my opinion, and you know what? That's okay. I'm sure you have your opinions too. You can leave them in the comments below, because there are tons of games that I didn't get to play or didn't get around to finishing, which a couple of just ones I want to throw out there, things like The Last Faith. You got that. You got Wargroove 2, which was great. That also deserves a spot on your list. You Will Die Here Tonight is another one that's really cool if you haven't checked that out. Cobalt Core is one I've really enjoyed, and Cross Splits, Wild Frost. See, there are tons of games that are not on this list because I just couldn't include that many on the list because either, again, I didn't finish them or they just were slightly, ever so slightly below that spot there. This was a great year for games in 2024. It is already shaping up to be pretty awesome as well. I can't wait to see what we have coming ahead of us. But again, go ahead and leave your favorite indie games or just your favorite games in general of 2023 down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, be sure to leave a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe to keep up to date with all things indie. But without further ado, my name is Finn. I will see you all next year. Have a happy new year. And we'll be here with our eyes on indie.